Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talent Gap Fireside Chat, where we discuss causes of and solutions to the talent gap. I'm your host, Pete Strauss, and joining me today is Eric Basu. Eric is founder and CEO at Haiku, Inc. Eric, thanks for being here. Could you give our audience a brief description of your career and how you came to be where you are today, professionally speaking?
Absolutely, yeah. So I start off, got my undergraduate degree in molecular biology. Decided to join the Navy, did that active duty for 9 years. After 9/11, I signed up for another 5 years in reserves. And in 2001, while I was in reserves, I actually founded my first company, my first startup, Centec Global. And I built that up over 20 years. And we hired a lot of cybersecurity talent when I was at Centec. Which actually led me to the formation of my current company, Haiku, which is designed to help solve that cybersecurity talent gap.
Awesome. So speaking of the talent gap, I've heard some people say it's not real. I've heard some people say it's real, but it's exaggerated. What's your position on that? Is the talent gap real?
I think that when it comes to the talent gap, so I think you have a lot of people that are trying to get into the field, and so they're doing a number of things to try to get into the field. And there are traditional education providers that are trying to help qualify them for the field. You have these boot camps that are all over the place, but none of them are really filling this gap.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I always say there's really no shortage at the entry level. Any shortages that we have as an industry are at that kind of mid to senior level, senior individual contributor level. I think the gap gets less pronounced when you start looking at manager level and above. I think everybody wants to hire the doers versus the people that want to manage the doers. Everybody's looking for that step up into management. So, and then too, there's a lot of burnout happening, people leaving the field, people retiring. So I think we have a massive succession planning problem as an industry. We need to funnel more people. We need to fill the top of the funnel now so that in 5 years, we're not so much worse off and more short of the people that we need at that magical senior level. So, that's great. So Haiku, I know a little bit about it, but hoping you can kind of tell our audience what you're looking to do with Haiku and how you kind of see that factoring into solving some of these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. So we came up with the idea for Haiku probably about 8 years ago. The idea there was hands-on training tools that you could use, that consumers could use to train. And so we started looking at those to say, well, what are they not addressing? And really what they aren't addressing is people trying to get into the field. It is still too hard for a beginner to come up with track. And they have beginner paths and they have, some other ways to do it, but it's still very unapproachable. And so we fit into a niche here where there are true, cybersecurity hacking games. There are true games like Hacknet, Greyhack, 19.4, a number like that. But nobody's going to get a job from playing those games. And so we made sure that we use the way video games teach in order to be able to convey the skills, but we also make sure that we're only focusing on real skills. And so we actually built a simulated Linux operating system in Unity, and we use that in order to train people. And so we have in World of Haiku, which is our video game available via Steam, very affordable, $24.99 when it's not on sale. The average player spends about 33 hours in there, and so an average cost of about 80 cents per hour. They get, by the time they're done, they get defensive cybersecurity, they get offensive cybersecurity, primarily offensive, and they get a really good understanding of the Linux operating system and how to navigate.
So I think a lot of the talent gap too is kind of driven from the fact that you have a lot of people that are looking to get in, but not necessarily so many entry-level jobs in which for them to land. How do you envision Haiku playing into that dynamic as far as working with hiring managers long-term to bring people into the field?
We actually, when we did the skills resume, when we created that, we actually went to employers and said, what would make you hire somebody if they didn't have the years of experience or the actual, job experience that you wanted? And the answer was more so than certifications, just knowing that that person had that many hours actually doing the job that they were, hiring them to do. And that's what led us to actually produce a skills resume. Because we have a video game format, we're able to record everything somebody does in the game. And then we're able to produce that, which other, platforms. If you're, just watching a video, somebody can tell if you watched the video, and they can tell if you took a test after, but they can't tell, how many hours did this person actually spend on it. Even if somebody installs our own Linux box at home, I think that's a good thing as a hiring manager, but I don't know how much time did they install it once and never touch it again, or are they in there 4 hours every night trying to figure out how to, build new Linux kernels and, use every single tool there is in the Kali Linux box. We actually have some case studies. A gentleman named Joshua Lagre, he actually posted on LinkedIn, and I wasn't even connected to him, and said, "Hey, I got my first job thanks to Haiku." And so I immediately reached out to him, and we did a case study on Joshua, and he did get his first cybersecurity job, and he attributed a lot of that to Haiku because he'd actually gotten the hands-on skills he needed.
That's awesome. I guess, is there a way that you could see that people can leverage the concepts that you're employing with Haiku to hire at other levels, or, not necessarily the folks coming directly out of your program, but maybe what are some lessons learned that you think that any hiring manager out there, because that's going to be a lot of this audience, could apply to get good people on board?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I actually got a call from the deputy director of NICE, and I thought it was kind of interesting because I didn't know her. And she said she wanted me to tell her about Haiku. And when I explained to her what we're doing and how we map the skills to the NICE framework, she said, "We've been trying to do this for years. We've been trying to convince employers not to hire based on certs or degrees, but based on the skills. But the problem is the employer has no way to validate the skills unless they have their own internal testing system, which is difficult. And most employers, certainly most HR departments, don't have the capability to do that." And she said, "You're the only program we know that's done this, the only system where you actually document it so they can actually look at that." And so that's one thing I would say to employers is that you can actually, if you're looking at somebody and you can actually look at a resume of how many hours they've spent in these specific skills that you're hiring for, you certainly should look at that, probably to a higher degree, I would say, than a non-relevant certification. Like if you're hiring somebody for a pen tester, whether they have a CISSP or not is kind of irrelevant. Whether they have an OSCP is relevant, but a lot of people have all kinds of different certifications, and there are certification boot camps that crank out certifications, and so there's less relevance to that. And really look at the skills that they have documented that they can do. And I think for hiring managers, having the ability to do that is a huge tool in your quiver, because now you get an idea for what somebody is going to be good at.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I hear a lot of debate on LinkedIn and elsewhere about certs versus degrees versus experience. I think I could guess what your stance on this is, but how do you come down on that debate, certs versus experience versus degrees? What do you think is the most important?
The experience, as long as it's actual hands-on experience. And that's the thing. Somebody might have done, let's say, a cybersecurity internship. What did they do during that internship? Maybe they were sitting there, learning, every single day how to work as a stock analyst. Or maybe they were shredding papers or getting coffee or doing something, else. But they were still, in a title of an internship. So even the experience, you have to take that with a grain of salt. Again, I think we're in a unique space with Haiku in that we actually show the ability for somebody to do the hands-on work.
Yeah, and that's usually very tough to do. Are you guys building any sort of metrics into the platform to determine actual performance, or is that on the roadmap? Maybe performance or something like that, where it's not just time spent.
We do, yeah. So it isn't just time spent right now. We actually assign them a rating of apprentice, journeyman, or master in very specific skills. So you can actually look at somebody's skills resume and figure out whether or not, not only how much time have they spent in that, but what is the rating in that particular field as well. And then, as I mentioned, we map it all to NICE. And so one of our customers has asked us to be able to map the skills they're developing to specific NICE workforce roles, so that they can actually look at and see for entry-level people coming in, what roles are they best suited for the company. And so, so that they can actually look at new people coming in. Because everybody says they want to be a pen tester, but, a lot of companies I've talked to have spent a lot of money sending people off to get their OSCP or something like that. and they come back and they say, this person still can't do this work. And I spent a lot of money doing that. It would have been really nice if I had seen some kind of assessment of their ability to learn this to begin with. And we actually do that because we, develop the skills and we map them specifically to these workforce roles. An employer can actually look and say, okay, this employee has spent this much time and is rated at this level for these skills that are specifically related to offensive cybersecurity. Maybe I should go ahead and invest in giving them an OSCP, certification or something along those lines.
Very cool. Yeah, not everybody's cut out to be a pen tester, and especially with it being one of the sexiest roles in security, there's a lot of people headed in that direction that maybe they're being sent down that path because somebody told them it was cool, or but they haven't actually done anything to know if they're going to be good at it or not. So that's very cool. So are you guys working with all the different, roles within the NICE framework, or are you focused on just a few right now?
We map to all of them because, the way that the NICE skills actually map to the roles, they kind of all lump in there. Right now, our products, particularly in Haiku Pro, we're striving for a balance of 1/3 offensive, 1/3 defensive, 1/3 forensic. What's interesting is because we look at the stats on all of our ranges every week, people still gravitate more to the offensive ones, but the people that do the defensive ones, they have very high ratings for them because they say, I can't get any kind of defensive training anywhere else. Like we just did a Wireshark one, the PCAP recap range, extremely popular because people love to, learn how to do Wireshark. And as soon as they start the range, they immediately get dropped into a Wireshark interface and they're learning Wireshark right there.
Very cool. I know you had mentioned to me previously that kind of on the roadmap for the platform is integrating with recruiters and developing relationships with us recruiters out there. How do you see that playing out over the coming years?
Yeah, I think there's a natural synergy with recruiters because we're trying to actually, we're taking the full life cycle from, I'm going to take somebody who's never seen a command prompt, get them exposed to cybersecurity, give them an idea of what they can be good at, carry them along into harder and harder progressions, and then eventually connect them to jobs because we actually connect people to jobs. We have a Job Connect feature where we take the skills that the person has and we go and pull jobs in that map to those skills so that they can take a look at them. And so I see there's a natural role for recruiters in there at this, job, end of the database where recruiters can come in and say, hey, in addition to these other jobs that are being pulled in for you automatically, I have these positions that are open. And the recruiter can now advertise those specifically to people that are skilled in those areas. If you're looking for a SOC analyst, then you can go in there and you can look for people that, have excelled in the SOC analyst skill development, and you can get that position specifically to them. And you've got a level of comfort as a recruiter when you're doing that, okay, well, this is somebody who isn't just saying, I can be a good SOC analyst even though I have no experience. This is somebody I can actually look at their scores and say, they're actually doing pretty good at this compared to the rest of their peers. So, let me give them a shot.
Do you guys have any data, I guess, like as far as statistics in terms of who scores what, how many people score in the upper percentile, that sort of thing? Like, I guess I'm kind of curious if it's a bell curve.
It's it's definitely a bell curve. We do. We look at the stats for all of our products every single week. We go through them and look at who's doing well, who's not doing well, what ranges and what challenges are, people having the most difficulty with. And we go back and adjust them in real time as well. We have, we incorporate a lot of the learning engineering techniques that you find in Duolingo into our World of Haiku product as well as our Haiku Pro product so that we have dynamic hints so that if somebody's stuck on something for too long a period, we have a funny little in-game AI that pops up and says, "Hey, I see that you're stuck. Why don't you try this or why don't you try that?" But it's definitely a bell curve. We have people that come in and they're way down here, and these are the ones that we really try to steer to World of Haiku because World of Haiku is really going to carry you through the hero story and go there. And we have a lot of people right here in the middle, which are people who are coming in that have some ability and some skills, and then over here we've got the real talented, the professional cybersecurity people who are, I've seen them attempt the same range 12, 13 times in a row because they are 100% determined they're going to beat that range. Because we do have some very difficult ranges out there. We have one buffer overflow range, the name escapes me right at the second, that nobody's been able to beat yet. It's a challenge. You actually have to create the buffer overflow, in order to be able to compromise the box. It's not easy. but we've had a lot of very talented people who have not been able to go beat that range yet.
Very cool. So you guys you're doing all sorts of things with Haiku. I'd imagine that there's probably some psychology on the back end that you've studied to, help people learn and stuff like that. Psychology is kind of a personal interest of mine. Could you speak to anything that you guys have studied, how the human mind works and how you're working with it?
I'm actually glad you asked me that, because I've had some people say, so all you did was create a video game. How is this different from other video games? And it's funny. It's when you make it seem so easy on the outside, that is a measure of, how well you did it. But so we spent a lot of time studying the Carnegie Mellon. We're actually teamed with Carnegie Mellon for developing some of our features. The Carnegie Mellon's Human-Computer Interaction Institute. That's where Duolingo was birthed out of. So we're working with literally the experts in the world there. We did a lot of studying. Jane McGonigal's Reality is Broken, great book where she talks about how reality should be more like video games, which is exactly what we did. There's a term now that's coming in vogue called serious games. That's serious games where you actually create it, and it's different from gamification. So gamification, let's say you take a PowerPoint to teach something. You put some bells and whistles, and you put a timer on there and a leaderboard. People say it's gamified, and therefore it's fun. 90% of the time, it's not fun. So gamification has got kind of a negative connotation because it's still boring. If you create a serious game, or a game to train, as we call it, you're creating a game, the purpose of being fun from the beginning, then you're using the way that game interacts with your mind in order to be able to get you to internalize the learning that the game is trying to teach you. And so, for example, one particular thing that we do is intermittent training. So we introduce the concept once. We introduce it a second time. We give the brain a break by letting it go do something else for a while. Then we come back and introduce the concept a third time with more cognitive distraction happening, so that your mind has to basically go back, pull the information that it had before, and apply it while it's being distracted. That causes, just the way our brains work, it causes the information to move from sensory memory to working memory to long-term memory. It's the way we work. It's a hack for your brain. And so Duolingo does this for anybody that plays Duolingo. All good learning engineering incorporates that one concept among probably a dozen concepts that we use. But we studied that. Celia Hoden has a great book called The Gamer's Brain, where she talks about how, and she writes the book on how to create a user interface and user experience such that the player enjoys the game more. And we did that to get it so that people get in the flow. As Jane McGonigal said, a very good video game gets you in the flow within 15 minutes. And that's why it's a good video game. And so we use the fact that video games can get you in the flow in 15 minutes versus anything else. If you're going to get in the flow in anything else in your life, snowboarding, playing a piano, playing a guitar, you've got to be a master at that, or at least really, really good. You don't sit there and on snowboarding the first day get into the flow because you're falling down all the time. Maybe not in the first few years. You can't get in the flow and really carve down the slopes. A good video game gets you in the flow within 15 minutes. So we capitalize on that with World of Haiku. And so that's our theory. And then people talk about actual hacking games saying, hey, you could try Hacknet. Hacknet's a hacking game that's a better game than this one. I would argue maybe yes, but nobody's going to get a job from playing Hacknet because it doesn't teach you real skills. It teaches you kind of how a hacker might do an offensive penetration test, but it's kind of like trying to get a job as a go-kart driver because you've been playing NASCAR on the Xbox. Nobody's going to get you a job. All it shows is that you have a level of interest in it.
Interesting. So yeah, speaking of the psychology of it, I got some sense that you're leveraging novelty and new experiences, and you don't want that novelty to, or you don't want the particular module or what skill that somebody's practicing to overstay its welcome. So you bring it back later before it gets to the point where somebody's tired of it. That's kind of interesting. I would assume you leverage some sort of reward mechanism to where you get that dopamine hit if somebody passes a module or achieves a certain level of success in a certain thing.
We do all the normal things that video games have, which I say they're the normal things, but they're important. So the auditory, the visual, the kudos from the non-player characters within the game, giving you strokes. In the real world, we have badges. We're working on certificates now to get them out there. So you can actually post on your LinkedIn or your social media a badge saying, I have completed the ethical hacker, intro to ethical hacker path in this game. And so we're really finding a lot of interest from the K through 12. We actually just did an event on Saturday with the Girl Scouts where we provided a cybersecurity certification badge. We used the first few levels, they went through it, and to get their cybersecurity certification badge. So we have a unique capability to go down, probably, I wouldn't say K through 12 certainly, but certainly through the 6 through 12, 8 through 12 very easily, 6 through 12 for precocious 6th graders, to teach them cybersecurity skills, to give them an idea as to what it would be like in the real world. And so, again, there's nothing else that can market as a game in that space. Try Hack Me Hack Box, way too hard. You're not going to get high schoolers en masse, who will be able to take a cybersecurity course and do that. You get a club who can do it, but you're not going to get the vast majority. So it's excluded to people who aren't naturally who don't naturally gravitate towards a STEM curriculum. But we have the ability to increase because the diversity in cybersecurity, because every demographic plays video games. As a matter of fact, we actually created it in a role-playing format because 60% of role-playing gamers are women versus 24% of cybersecurity professionals are women. So we thought, well, if we can get a number of women and young girls to actually approach this and say, this command prompt isn't that hard, and this is actually pretty fun, maybe I should look at this as a career. We're hoping to increase some of the diversity that way.
Yeah, I mean, you get started early enough. If kids are doing this in 8th grade, you can only imagine where they're going to be when they get out of high school, even much less out of college. So, yeah, I think that's one thing that's been lacking just in society in general is early knowledge of cybersecurity. People, they hear the term, but they don't know what it actually means in practice, or they really don't have the foggiest idea. When I first got into the field as a recruiter, people would say, "Ooh, cybersecurity, that sounds fancy," but they'd have no idea what it was. People wouldn't know what a gas station skimmer is. That's cybersecurity. Physical security can be involved with cybersecurity. And yeah, just nobody knows. So even just as far as general security awareness, Haiku is a great way for, people of all ages to start to understand this stuff. So,
but you're right. I mean, I think simply exposing kids to that, understanding what a Linux term is, understanding the difference between coding and what command prompt is, understanding what offensive cybersecurity is, understanding what defensive cybersecurity is, those kind of things, when put into a young mind, give them an idea of, maybe I could do this for a career.
Cool. Do you guys have plans to, I guess, work with especially some schools that kids maybe don't get as much technology education, where maybe the computer labs aren't very up to date or anything like that? Some inner city schools and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're trying. One of the issues people have is they don't have access to laptops. So we're actually taking our World of Haiku product, we're putting it online, so it's available. It'll be available via a web browser, but we're making it specifically available on the lowest end Chrome browser, which a lot of these poor schools have, because we want to make it accessible to kids like that. So that's absolutely one of all these kids that this might be their ticket, to break a generation of poverty that may not require a college degree. I think, as you're seeing, a lot less employers are requiring college degrees right now. And so they may not have to go to college, which is becoming more and more unaffordable, unfortunately, for many, many kids. And this may give them the ability to get into that job.
Yep. And hoping the culture around education and credentialism and stuff like that continues to change for the better. I think even 5 years ago, there was more of a sense of you have to have a degree or you're unemployable in security or IT. But that is changing. And anymore, I mean, it seems like you can get a good education self-directed in so many different ways. And Haiku is a great example of that. But especially the people that, maybe they don't have a lot of resources growing up, but they're very driven and they're passionate. That's a really good fit for the security field that you don't want to weed out because of, a piece of paper. So, obviously, you guys are doing a lot of great things. Where do you see the future of the platform going, and what are some stretch goals for you guys?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we continue to add content. We add new content every single week. We're definitely trying to bridge the gap between World of Haiku and Haiku Pro. We've listened to our users, and they said, "Okay, I've finished the available content in World of Haiku, which we are adding to, but I step into this Kali Linux box of Haiku Pro, and man, this feels like a different world." And so we're working on bridging that gap. We've got some different features we're going to be releasing in the next couple of months specifically to address that.
Do you have any plans maybe to, and I guess this is a little bit less technical, maybe slightly different than, some security operations or offensive security type of role, but in the future, could you see a scenario in which you would be preparing people for more GRC oriented roles, more writing focused, documentation focused, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly looking at those. It's right now we start off the platform specifically for the idea I want to train hands-on skills. You could argue that preparing documentation is a hands-on skill, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. I think it would certainly take a different format. The format that we've done, though, with the game format of actually creating a game, that's where I've had a lot of CISOs coming up to me and going, "Hey, can you do this with your platform? Can you do that with your platform?" Because they recognize the value of having an actual serious game, and that is our differentiator. There is nobody else that has a serious game. I've actually had some people I've talked to that they started gamifying their labs after talking to us, but that's not the same. It's the same thing I talked about with gamification. You can put lipstick on a pig, to use that old adage, but it's still a pig, right? If it's boring training, it's still going to be boring training. You have to create a game from that. And I actually mentioned this to one person. I said, if you want to replicate what we did, you have to create a game studio within your company from the ground up, because we actually have a game studio, but we build serious games. And so certainly this serious game platform can be used in different ways.
Awesome. Well, I think that about does it for most of our questions here. Definitely want to make sure that folks can get a hold of you because, like I said, this is really cool what you're doing here with Haiku. So I guess first question as it relates to that, are you hiring right now? And if so, for which roles, and how can people get a hold of you?
Sure. Eric, E-R-I-C, at haikuinc.io, I-N-C. So HAIKUINC.io. Two, we are hiring. We're currently hiring for marketing and sales positions. We spent the last year and a half to the end of 2022 developing product, released our products to the market, and then this year we're trying to feed the demand. And so we're going out there and aggressively hiring salespeople and marketing people. No engineering right now, but we are continually looking for people that would like to get experience by helping us to build ranges, build content. We're continually hiring part-time folks to do that. So if that's the case, somebody's looked at that, I'd recommend they go to our Discord. Actually, I'd recommend everybody go to our Discord. It's easy. It's discord.gg/haiku. So very easy to find us on our Discord.
Awesome. And final question for me, what are people not talking about but should be when it comes to hiring in the security field?
Maybe they are talking about it, but I haven't heard it. But the number of people who, I don't know what the right word is. They may have a top 1% try hack me, or they may have a number of degrees, but they really don't know the job. And I feel like there are a number of people that get into a job, they can't do the job, and rather than buckle down and do the hard work of getting the job, they then move on to another job later on. And so I've seen a little bit of that, not a whole lot. So that's why I don't know if it's something that's common among other places. But with all the demand for cybersecurity people and the buzz around the different certifications, there is an ability to kind of slip through the cracks and not be able to actually do the work. So I've seen a few of those, but I don't know. And again, I don't know if people are talking about that or not. But it's something I just kind of observed, and I was actually kind of surprised about. But that's obviously not helping to fill the cybersecurity gap, because while they take a job that somebody qualified could have done, that person, the person that could have filled that is still looking for a job, and they're filling that job.
Yeah, it's always a zero-sum game in hiring experienced security people. For sure, your new hire is somebody else's backfill. So that doesn't help. And yeah, I think it's a consequence. Sometimes if everybody running around with their hair on fire, it's hard to keep track of everybody. And accountability isn't always there and transparency isn't always there. So that's a great point. Well, appreciate your time, Eric. Great hearing about you and Haiku, and hopefully some folks see this and reach out to you here soon. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.